We're doing a series called Amazing Relationships, and I wanted, because we've been doing it for a while, I wanted to go back to the beginning and remind us where we started. And I think it's important because if you understand the little foundation that we tried to put here, it helps everything else. And so let me review. From the beginning, this is what we're talking about. God, in the beginning, it says, God, Genesis 1:26, let us, right, make humankind in our image. So right away, it's us and our. It's not me and mine. God is this plural. And it later got a name, 300 years after Jesus, it got a name, the Trinity. But the idea of God as this lonely being on a throne is actually an idea that was adopted from the era of Zeus. So the real understanding of God is this plurality and more than one, but so tightly woven together as one. And if you were here that Sunday, we did some dancing on the stage and we had people intertwine. But if you can imagine people dancing and intertwining so fast that it blurs together and it appears as one. And so what we learned is not only is God plural, but the universe is relational. So God is this intertwining dance and the universe itself. And I quoted a guy. I want to re-quote him because this might, if you're an investigative reader type, which a few of you are, because you always come up to me afterwards and go, what was that guy's name again? What was that gal's name again? What was the book? Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Ready? Oh, by the way, as an aside, I don't know if this is important or not, but I was listening to a sermon online for my own little edification. It's out in Arizona. This guy, he's a paleontologist and a priest. What do you get when you cross a paleontologist and a priest? A Teilhard de Chardin. That's what you get. And this guy, go figure. This guy gave a sermon. They put different figures of modern day saints or heroes or whatever in their stained glass. This is out in Arizona. This guy is in their stained glass, and I heard a whole sermon about this guy and the impact he made. Anyway, because most of us have never, heard of the guy. Priest and paleontologist, this is what he said. Love is the very physical, paleontologist, structure of the universe. It's how the whole universe is. It's everything's orbiting. Everything's dancing around the other. And this is how we understand how everything's structured. So the reason that we want the relationship series is because we want to learn how to dance better with each other. And what we also learn is that we are all connected. And so we've talked about communication. Last week we talked about romance. We've talked about those up and close relationships. I want to talk today about inclusion. And so this would have to do with relationships with people that you may not think of having a relationship with. Or you may think, I can keep these people out of my circle. If I structure my life well enough, I can just keep them away from me. And so Jesus comes along, and when Jesus started his storytelling ministry, he was radically inclusive. I'm going to use this phrase. I want to say it together. Radically inclusive. 1, 2, 3. Radically inclusive. With more enthusiasm like you cared, though. Ready? Radically inclusive. Now, many of you grew up in a religious environment where you were taught a lot about who was excluded. And by the way, usually your clan was in. Isn't it funny? Like if you're Catholic, well, we happen to be the in group. If you're Baptist, you happen to be the in group, right? But what Jesus didn't talk about was excluding, but he talked about radical, not radical. So inclusive and radical. 1, 2, 3. Not slightly, not, oh, well, if you insist. Radical. You ever met a radical person? Huh? They just don't care. They're a bull in a china. They're blowing up everything in front of them. And so what Jesus did is he's coming through and he's upending one system after another. The systems in that day were set up to exclude. And how they did it was by rank. Basically, you got ranked. If you were a peasant, which most people were peasants, very poor, you were down here. If you were female, you were down even further. And on the system went. And along comes Jesus, and he starts telling stories. One of the stories he told was, by the way, if I can just set up the context of the story, Jesus is having dinner at the house of a Pharisee. So there was another system. You had clean people and you had unclean people. So these were the religious people that could get it all together, and these are the people that couldn't. Let's be totally honest for just a split second. You don't have to stay honest for long. Who here has ever felt like in the religious context, you weren't good enough? Or whoever, ready? Vote again. Who was told you weren't good enough? By the way you dress, by the laws you kept, by a commandment you broke, and by some church rule that you didn't know about in the back. Anybody? What does that feel like? That feels unbelievably horrible because you are now excluded. You're out of the dance. You've been pushed out. Anybody here ever been pushed out? It feels really bad to be pushed out of a circle. Now, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling. What I'm learning as my life is aging here is people who've experienced it can relate better. So I'll start with a mild example because it wasn't that traumatic, but I didn't forget it. Cedar Point. Who's been to Cedar Point before? All right. I always had to go everywhere with my older brother David, who's 11 months older than me. But if you're 11 months older, he was always taller than me. Remember the age difference in those days? They're always taller, way taller. And you remember at Cedar Point to get on the rides, you had to go up to that stick. You remember the stick? Now, I should have known after a while that there's just one stick, that they're all the same size. But I went to ride after ride. I'm like, I needed a lot of rejection, I guess. But my brother kept getting to go on the rides, and I kept not getting to go. And for the rest of my life, I remembered how terrible that felt, that he could go on the ride, and I could not. Minor. But life has a way of cutting people out for whatever reason. And in Jesus' day, he comes and he tells a story. And the story, while he's at a dinner party with a guy who's on the upper side, and there notice Jesus can relate to people that are on the lower side. Jesus says, you know what, can I just tell you a story? And he tells a story about a guy who has a banquet. And in this banquet, he invites all these people, and the banquet's all ready, and they make excuses. This guy has an excuse why he can't come. This guy has an excuse why he can't come. Another person has an excuse why they can't come. And so the frustrated banquet giver says to his team, go out, right, and go into the streets and to the alleys and bring in the poor, the crippled, the lame. Just another version of Matthew's, the good or the bad. The idea is go get anyone you can find and fill this up. Now, many of you grew up in church. Who grew up in church? Anybody ever heard this before? Well, when I heard, I didn't grow up in church, but when I heard it, it was always translated about getting to heaven. Now we know, because now we know a lot more, that the kingdom of God was not about getting to heaven. We know that clearly because the prayer that Jesus taught us was, what? Thy kingdom come on, as opposed to going to some other place. So this is about life on what? This is about the kingdom, which is a really bad thing because it has this picture to it. But just think of it this way. It's how God would do things. The realm, we'll call it the realm of God, the rule of God. In other words, how God would want it is not that certain people are here and certain people are here, but that we're all here. And so, he says, just don't bring anybody in. Now, when you and I hear this story, we go, well, I don't know. It means God's generous and he likes to let other people in, and that's nice, and we should do the same. Sure, it means all of that. But do you know how radical this story was? Do you know? You don't have a dinner party and let one person randomly just sit next to another person. You just don't do that. Because in that day, you would never, ever, ever have a pure person sitting next to an impure. It was very clearly known. You were known when you walked in. This person is religiously pure. They keep all the commandments. And they would never, this is true, they would never sit next to or at a table with somebody that was impure. Do you know what chaos you can create by just going out into the streets and just saying, come on in, anybody, just come, grab a seat. Grab a seat. You didn't say grab a seat back then. The whole society was based on honor and shame. This guy's affecting my honor. We can't have women at our table. We can't have crippled people. They're cursed by God. That was the belief back then. If you're crippled, you're cursed by God. It's obviously some sin in your life or your family, and it's going to get on us. Certainly, if you're crippled, you're going to have to sit at another table. What is this come and grab a seat stuff? I mean, today, we have seating charts and arrangements. I did a wedding last weekend, and I had a card, and I was told where to sit. Fortunately, everyone was cool. We had Charlie, everybody's in their finest, and Charlie, food everywhere. And they were the greatest people, pastor around, everybody. But you know what I mean? What is this come and grab a seat stuff? I think the problem is we don't understand how radically inclusive Jesus was, which is why it was like he did this. By the way, Jesus lived out this parable, right? It wasn't just a random story that he told. It was how he lived his life. Because it was always being asked, why are you eating with these people? You shouldn't be associating with them. Jesus is coming in, and what he did is it's like a social nightmare for everybody. This is getting out of control. Some anthropologists have studied, and what they've learned is that when you study a society, you can learn almost everything you want to know about a society by how people eat. Interesting. You can know the ranking systems, you can know the belief systems, you can know the value systems by how they eat. And two particular anthropologists studied this, and this is what they said. The table is like a mini model for all of society. It's a little miniature model. This is how society works. These people eat here together, these people eat here, these people eat here. Why? Because when you start sharing food, listen carefully. Anybody ever share food with somebody? Like, I know in today's, we don't really share. What would you like to order? They order, it's clean, separate, right? And then next person places their order. That's not how people used to eat. Do you know this? In much of the world, that's still not how people eat. You sit at a table, there's a big bowl of something, you grab a hunk of bread, and you dip remember Jesus talking about dipping of the Last Supper? You guys read anything? He who dips. There's a big bowl. Just go to Africa with me one time. It's just a big bowl, and you take a hunk of something, and you dip it in there. When you share like this, they don't have Tostitos commercials about double dipping. It's just, you just eat. Now, honestly, some of you would just be weirded out by that. You're just such a germaphobe, you can't share anything with anybody. And it's unthinkable to some of you. That's how segmented our society is. That concept is actually unthinkable. You're not saying that person, I'm better than that person. You're just like, ew, I can't do that. Just because you're spoiled. Politely, I say to you. Because you can have everything the way you want it. Did I say it politely or did I not say it politely? Very polite, thank you, sir. So you just take and you dip. Now, if you just start throwing people together, and, hey, can I have a hunk of the bread? And they're tearing it off, and where does my bread end? There's no end to your bread and a start of theirs. It's just all one. You just rip off a hunk, and they rip off a hunk, and you dip it in there, and you take whatever's in there. Sometimes it's like a soupy vegetable mix, and if you're fortunate, like these days in Africa, if you're a certain part, there might be a little stew, there might be a little meat in there. You can just eat. And the people at the top of the pyramid are thinking, this could get out of control. They could get used to this. Huh? Anybody ever hear that parable Jesus told about the mustard seed? Anybody remember this? It's like it turns into a whole... It's right after the one about the leaven going into the bread, and it goes all the way through the dough. I was reading a guy this week. He gave me a new perspective on it that I had never heard. It made a lot of sense. He said, these mustard seeds, they grow in the wild. But then, if you take them, as people would do from time to time, and you plant them in your garden, which is the way Jesus describes the parable, he said it turns into a huge tree. And we sometimes think about it, I was like, that's a real pleasant thing. He goes, no, actually, this mustard seed, when it's brought home, it's these seeds, they just germinate immediately. He goes, it spreads like wildfire. It takes over. Are you hearing me? These mustard seeds, they just take over. They're dangerous. Could it be that Jesus' ideas of radical inclusivity were dangerous to society as they knew it? This could upend everything. If you let these people believe that they're just as good as everyone else. Now, you have to know, you got about 5% up here, and you got about 90% down here. And as long as these people believe they should be down here because God has ordered it this way, or their sins, or society, whatever it is, but if you start to let them believe that everyone's equal, that's how all the major social revolutions have happened. You can't just let them eat together. I mean, the Pharisees are just stomping their feet. You can't just let everyone eat together. And Jesus did, and he continued, and he continued, and he continued. I don't know if you know how radically inclusive Jesus was. I just don't think you do. But there was a guy, he lived 1 BC. Ready? 1 BC. And about 100 years ago, they found a letter south of Cairo, Egypt. Are you with me? And in this letter, the guy's name was Hilarion. He was writing to his wife. Now, they lived much further south of Alexandria, which is Cairo kind of area. They lived further south, and he went north to work. And they had a boy, and she was pregnant with their second. Ready? They actually found this parchment in a garbage. I'm just going to actually read you a slice. 1 BC, the year 1 BC, an Egyptian named Hilarion writing a letter to his wife, Alice, A-L-I-S. Don't worry, I remain in Alexandria. I urge you, be concerned about the child, that's their firstborn. And if I receive my wages soon, I will send them to you. And if by chance you bear a son and it's a boy, let it be. If it's a girl, cast it out. Don't forget me, sign so-and-so. What? Some of you are like that. You're not reading the real things. I'll give you all the quotes. You can go look it up. This is how society was. She's a girl. She's going to be a burden on the family. Cast her out. You cast her out. What do? You put her in the street. Maybe someone picks her up for a slave. Maybe she just dies of exposure to the elements. Love you, honey, be home soon. I don't think we know how radical Jesus was when he said, bring the children here. Bring them here. Because see, some of you missed part of the Bible where the disciples are pushing them away. Like, no. Because they're used to society as it is. How many are used to society as it is? This morning I was driving to church and I saw a guy. By the way, if you ever want to get somewhere fast, just go on Sunday morning. Ain't nobody doing nothing on Sunday morning. You know what I mean? You're on the road and you could drive sideways on 275 on Sunday morning. Ain't nobody doing nothing on Sunday. And I see a guy, there's a car. Wow, there's a rare sighting. There's an automobile. And a guy with his family driving and a tie on. What's that guy doing? Yeah, we know what society's like, right? Everybody knows what he's doing. We're going to church. Poor soldier sweating his brains out. It's just common in our society. We know what that is. In their society, well, it's a girl, so. Some of you are like, no way. I want to tell you two things. First, it's easy to look back and go, why did people think that way? Why did people do that, right? But what we don't understand is somebody had to blow that system up. Somebody had to blow up one system after another system after another system. What Jesus did was radical. He took them. Now, this is important to notice. Mark 10:16 is huge. This is the actual actions. He says he took them, put them in his arms, he blessed them, right? Placed his hands on them. These actions, taking them in his arms, putting his hands on them and blessing them. These are all the actions of, in those days, what a father would do when they accepted their son into their family. That's just how it worked. Once those actions were taken, the child was in. What were they saying about Jesus? This guy's letting everybody in. He's letting everyone in the circle. And every time you grow up or you learn a circle, you're told a circle, whether it's a religious circle or a racial circle or an economic circle or a neighborhood circle or whatever it is, and you realize that there's other people are going to get in that circle. It can feel weird. I'm not trying to tell you it doesn't feel weird. It's unnerving. But you just have to know what Jesus was doing. He just kept opening up the circle. When I worked with students, we used to always do a thing. And we would always have what we called an open chair. So a lot of times we do circles. We have discussions in circles. We have 8 chairs or 8 kids and put them. But every time we made a circle, we always had an empty chair. Always. No matter how many people you had, you have to get one extra chair. It was a mental image. It was a symbol to say, this is an open group, not a what? There's always one more person that we need to include, that we need to allow, that we need to accept. And people can fill your mind, send it racing with, oh, how terrible, oh, it's all going to fall apart if we let this happen. But the reality is, we have to let it happen. Jesus leads us there. He says to us, don't exclude. Don't rank. Don't label. Don't judge. He just says, scooch over a little bit. I don't know about you, but if you ever go to dinner with me and we have too many people for the table, now some people, they get real, ma'am, we're going to need another table. We're just going to bring this table over here. If you ever go with me, and I get a say, which I don't always, but if I do, I'll say, no, we're fine. We'll just scooch. And it's like almost something inside. I don't know what kind of person you are, like, excuse me. But for me, I would rather, I feel like, anybody? I don't want to feel like it's the Batman dinner with a, hello, could you pass the salt? Sending smoke signals, salt. Just scoot. The other day we had dinner and there was way too many people We had two too many. It's for the proper. So I just sat on the corner. I had the little thing hitting me in the abs the whole night. How many? I'd rather have it hit me in the abs and us be closer. Are you with me? So for my thing, let's not bring another table. Let's just bring an extra chair. When you share food, you share life. And who gets invited to the table is a game changer. I think the church has to think about this today. The church has been known throughout history for excluding people. Only later to get it right. Only later to apologize. Do you know how much pain it brings to be excluded? Now we exclude people because we can quote a Bible verse. People quote, Colossians. They quote different verses. Well, this is why this group's out. This is why this group's out. I mean, this ship, if you're going to get on board or you'll miss this one, whether you're gay or straight, you're welcome. You're included. You're part of the family. Oh, no, but I know a Bible verse. No kidding, you know a Bible verse. You quote all the Bible verses that you want to quote at the time you want to quote them to fit your agenda. Do you know Colossians 3:23? Of course you don't. That's not on your refrigerator. Of course you don't know it. It says, slaves, obey your masters. Awkward. Hear the air conditioning pause. We just got over that verse. We just decided to get over it. Some people have reasons of explaining it. I brought in a hermeneutics professor from Canada years ago to help you guys, but it doesn't matter. We just got over it. We just played over. We said, I don't know. But love says, come on in. I like the awkwardness. I can't wait for the emails. Listen, friends. Radically inclusive. Radically inclusive. Willing to be bold and courageous. This was Jesus. Come on in. No, not those people. No. Not these people. Everybody. Now listen carefully, because some of you, I know you're going to go get your kids and run out of here, but listen. There will come a day, like churches have now, as late as the 1970s, have apologized for excluding African American people and being, right? Apologize. I was wrong about that. Be on the right side of history, friends. Radically, what? Inclusive. I don't understand. You don't have to understand people. You don't have to know. I include you. You're human, I include you. You're my brother, you're my sister. I don't know everything about you, I don't understand. How many know there's people that are Christian that I don't understand at all? The same color as me, same age as me, and it's not about that. Here's what it's about. You make a decision. We accept. We love you. You're welcome. Let's stand, we'll have a closing prayer. So this could get out of control, Chris. Listen to me. Listen. When I was telling you about this dance, perichoresis, I gave you this word. I looked it up just for grins afterwards, and I got a YouTube clip. And there's actually it showed a YouTube clip of this dance in Greece happening in modern day times. And there's this huge plaza, and there's all these people. And this guy gets out there and just starts dancing. You know how they do. Well, how they do. Really nice. And then someone comes out to join him. Huge plaza. Next thing you know, another person comes out to join them, and another person comes out, and and the next thing you know, there's no end to this. Who gets in this dance? There's hundreds of people in this town square all dancing together. Shouldn't that be the kingdom of God? Shouldn't that be the church? Just come on in. You are loved. You are welcome. You're accepted just the way you are.